Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a fantastic guest for you coming out of Canada, Shirley Engel. And I want to start out with this. If you're ready to unlock your on-camera charisma and transform your public presence, well, Shirley Engel, she's a former television reporter. Now she's a camera confidence and visibility coach. And today's talk, we're going to talk about mastering the art of captivating audiences built across digital platforms. And she's done amazing things, and I'm really happy to have her on the show. So, Shirley, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I introduced you and briefly just talk about how you got there, and we'll dive into the questions to add value to the audience.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here as an entrepreneur. I didn't start that way, though. My first love and career for about 20 years was as a television journalist. I worked my way up from the woman who had the camera and the editing and doing the whole thing myself to traveling the world with Canada's prime ministers, a couple of them, because I covered politics and economics for a national television station here in Canada. From there, I went into communications, so advising executives, CEOs, that kind of thing on media, on public affairs. And then during the pandemic, I took a very sharp turn to become an interior design professional. So I
Hmm.
launched my first business. And I quickly scaled it to six figures in the first year by getting on TV, getting on stages, basically drawing on my magnetic on camera and stage presence to get my name out there. And what was unique about it was that was an industry where I was a nobody. I had to really build myself up from nothing. And people started asking me, oh, how do you do that? How are you so confident on camera? How do you get these gigs? And long story short, it evolved into a whole other business, which is now called Camera Confident. And I help entrepreneurs in all different niches get visible, get comfortable using video, and really take video marketing to the next level so they can compete in today's really crowded marketplace.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic introduction. And I want to start off by this question here because I started off the same way. I was a nobody, and then I was like, I realized the power of social media. And so one thing is talking about is a lot of the guests have been reporters or journalists. Do you have to be a on-camera person to develop this skill, or can it be developed and taught and learned?
Absolutely not. In fact, now that I'm in the entrepreneur space and I basically live on social media like a lot of entrepreneurs who are in service-based business do, and I'll tell you, I had to unlearn things that I used to do as a journalist. For example, speaking like a journalist in a journalist voice. You'll notice, I know in the States in particular, the US, a lot of journalists speak in like a journalist voice. That doesn't fly when it comes to video marketing because in 2024, 2025, people want authenticity. So they don't want to hear a version of you that's fake. They don't want to hear you putting on a show. They want you to be you. They want you to be yourself. Now, what does that mean? That means obviously you have to kick it up a few notches for video. If you just talk the way you would talk normally to a friend, you'd come across as pretty flat, right? Would say that the way that you speak as a marketer and as a business owner is different than the way you would speak as a journalist. That said, there are some fundamentals of journalism, such as storytelling. Journalists are excellent at distilling a lot of complex information, jargon, buzzwords into understandable, clear, concise, and in particular in television. I wouldn't write newspaper articles. I would write for broadcast, which is a very different thing than writing for your website or writing a social media post or writing an article, right? So the idea of video marketing draws a lot on journalism because that kind of writing is really effective and storytelling is effective. But so is personality. So is taking a stand on things, talking about what you offer. You're selling when you're on video. Journalists don't sell. We're supposed to have no opinion. We're supposed to be objective. And so there are a lot of differences, but sometimes I also think about a lot of the similarities because it's a lot of transferable skills. But absolutely, you do not have to have a background in journalism. And you can learn this, and it doesn't have to take you as long as it took me.
Yeah, I really love that answer. And for the audience, we're going to talk about in the letter half, essentials of a magnetic media pitch, storytelling, authenticity, how you get good and how you get your reps in. But I want to preface that with this question here, because traditionally it's been like you got on TV, you got on radio, you got the biggest exposure you got in the States here is like you advertise on the like the NFL or Super Bowl and these types of Oscars. Is that changing now? Because now especially with the media here in the States, people don't trust it as much, and a lot of the advertising is moving on to TikTok and Instagram. Is TV still the best way to get your message out there, or are there better ways?
Don't tell my journalist friends, but no, absolutely not. And let me just ask you a question. Do you have a subscription to traditional television channels?
I haven't watched TV in over 20 something years. Most of my media consumption is now YouTube or podcast, but
Exactly. So I hate to say it, and definitely there's still a place for it. For example, interior design, I was on the local news station, people watched it. I would get people to say, they'd call me for services and they would say, "Oh, like I saw you on CTV or I saw you on this show." But the reality is that most business owners will get much more bang for their buck by being on social media platforms because that's where the audience is. And you need to go where people are hanging out, where your people are hanging out. And another thing that really I think people should keep in mind, especially if they're trying to market their businesses, is you don't have to be everywhere, nor should you be everywhere. Because when you try to be everywhere, you're not going to do any of those things. If you want to really grow on YouTube and establish a brand on YouTube, that is one whole other animal than if you are looking to grow on TikTok and you want to do these other quick short videos. You can do short videos on YouTube as well, but it's just a different audience and it's a different strategy. So my advice to entrepreneurs is always start with your audience. Where does your audience hang out? If your audience is a boomer audience that is really hardcore news consumers that still watch the big television stations, then yeah, that probably will be a good place for you to get a spot on a local show to talk about your product or service or offer. But if you're looking to target anybody who has not watched television in a long time or doesn't have a traditional television subscription, and I will say that even includes many boomers, by the way, because YouTube is a huge place for people over 65 these days as well, then I would be very strategic about investing your resources, your time, and your money into putting out video where your people hang out, where it's going to reach those people.
yeah, yeah, that's and there's a place for traditional TV and radio, but you have to use it more strategically. So moving the question, the conversation forward is what are key elements of a compelling media pitch and how can entrepreneurs ensure they're noticed by their audience and their following in their media?
That's a great question. And I'm 100% not saying don't pitch to the media because, of course, there's still a lot of value in that for certain kinds of businesses. And here is exactly what I mean by that. If you're a local business, if you operate in a certain city or town or area, advertising on the radio, people are driving, that's pretty effective, right? Advertising on the local media station, if you organize something that is really tailored to people in your local area, that is also a really great place for you to do that. And a lot of businesses are very successful in doing that. Let's say you are in the political economic world, like I live in Ottawa, Canada. So this is a very public affairs oriented town. And yeah, the local stuff works well. I'm sure it's very similar in Washington, D.C. If you want to pitch to these traditional media, there are a few things to keep in mind. And the first is don't bury the lead. And when I say lead, L-E-D-E, it's the lead, which is the headline of what you're going to talk about. So a lot of people think, oh, I want to be on this show. That's nice. So does everybody else. So you've got to go into that pitch with a compelling hook, just like you do in your marketing. So what is the hook? What is the headline? And do your research. So if you're pitching to a local TV station, is there a specific event in the calendar? Maybe it's Thanksgiving, the holidays. Maybe it's the release of a new product or a new movie is out and it is tied to a theme that your business really relates to or represents. So I say look for events in either the calendar, in the news cycle, or just things that people are talking about, like the season, for instance. Oh, summer's around the corner. Tie your idea, your hook, to an event, and that makes it a lot more palatable for a media outlet to cover what you are talking about because you need to anchor your idea to something. And the other thing I would say, there's a lot to pitching, obviously. We could do a whole podcast on that. But a big piece of advice is know who you're pitching to. Who is their audience? What are they likely to talk about? Don't pitch something super lifestyle to a very news-oriented program, and they're not going to go for that. Have a bit of an understanding of what that show is, just like on a podcast. You're not going to go pitch yourself to a podcast that has nothing to do with the topic. And believe me, I get those pitches all the time. And I'm like, did you read what my podcast is actually about? These are very simple things that a lot of people don't think about. And it automatically puts you higher up in the pile, so to speak, if you show an understanding of these things and you really demonstrate that you really know what value is to this particular outlet and then you're prepared to deliver.
Yeah, I love that. Talking about storytelling and what is your approach and strategy to crafting important stories during media appearances, and what tips do you have for people for crafting stories that are engaging, memorable, also educational and informative?
Yeah, I think that it comes down to a very simple principle, which is that people relate to people. They relate when they have some kind of example or some kind of story that makes them feel something. So don't just tell me what you do and how it benefits people, but give me an example. Give me a story that allows people to really experience your service, your product, whatever it is that you are in business to do. There's always going to be people involved, no matter what kind of business you're in, because ultimately that human relationship piece is what is going to create that connection. So I say really look for those stories, whether you're pitching to a media outlet or you're doing a video for social media. Do you have those examples? A lot of entrepreneurs will come to me, and a lot of the clients I work with are starting out in video marketing, and they're like, I don't have those examples yet. I have my own example. I did this thing, and because I work with a lot of coaches and course creators, and maybe they don't have a huge roster of clients and examples, but they themselves have made this transformation, or business owners who know exactly what they want to deliver and they themselves have a story to tell. So your own story can also be very powerful. And especially from a media point of view, if you're going to approach, especially a television station with video, do you have video that could help support the story you're telling? Whenever, as a journalist, I would get a pitch and they would be like, oh, and by the way, I have B-roll, which is video that's not you talking on camera, it's just video of what you're talking about, then that would immediately make me think, okay, less work for me. I don't have to go out and find video about this. They actually have it already. You want to make sure that video is of a certain quality, but it really helps to bring that story alive. So I would say leading with story and weaving stories through your content. So you're not talking to people up here. You're actually giving them something to relate to so they can understand the benefits and what it's going to look and feel like to work with you.
Mm, yeah, I love that. You mentioned earlier in the conversation that there's this journalistic voice or style, and we all know that the audience and your followers want to see something that's authentic and real. So when people are on camera, how does someone maintain their authenticity while still delivering a polished performance? And what does authentic really mean in this context?
That's such an amazing question. A lot of people go on camera and they picture themselves speaking to a crowd. They're like, okay, here we go. And they're thinking about 500 people on the other side of the camera. That is the quickest way to get nervous, to feel overwhelmed, and to start almost like yelling at the camera, right? Because, like, can you hear me? My biggest tip, especially for entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, CEOs who are just starting this, is to picture a person on the other side of the camera. So I'm talking to the lens right now, I'm just talking to you. I'm not talking to a big crowd. And what it really has helped a lot of my clients is picturing their mother. I have one client who helps people who are on the cusp of retirement. And one of the things she talks about is how to live a purposeful retirement because she watched her father fall into depression when he retired. So she thinks about talking to her dad when he was going through that, or maybe even before. So she could have rewind the tape and what if I got to him before that time? What would I say to him? And you notice when you start to speak to the camera the way you would to speak to someone over a cup of coffee, having a drink, speaking to your spouse, a mother, a child sometimes, because we have to keep that language to very conversational. You will instantly notice that you start to become more relatable, more authentic, and more you because you're talking to someone as yourself. The other big thing is, and I say this all the time in all of my trainings and all my videos, my YouTube channel, speak to the lens. Because another thing that we have to get comfortable doing, because it's not comfortable at all, is looking at the lens when we're on camera. It's the equivalent of making eye contact in real life. And there's a huge difference, even as I'm talking to you right now. If I look at you, Christopher, right now, I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at the camera. Look at the difference in when I talk, how I come across versus when I look at the lens. I'm actually not looking at you, but I'm looking at the lens, which to the audience makes it look like I'm looking them in the eye, I'm making eye contact, and that is the first point of connection that you make on video. One of these things that trips people up is they'll film on their phone, right? I have my phone right here with me, and I usually will film like this where I'm looking at myself. The problem with that is I'm looking at myself, not the lens of the camera, which is a very awkward place to look. Turn your camera around and film this way, because then I have no choice but to look at the lens. It's like when someone says, I'm going to take a picture of you, cheese. And imagine if you were like, okay, and you looked over there, right? So make eye contact, just like you would in real life with a real person, and talk to one person. Those are the two biggest tips that I have.
Yeah, no, and we have around 5 more minutes remaining. And so you talked about just practicing with your camera. What other daily practices or exercises do you recommend? And for someone just to consistently improve their on-camera presence, and also talk about just a lot of people like this idea of getting like posting on social media. I know people that have stories that they had to spend 2 hours to write a post and just being social media shy. How do you get over that?
So many things. If you only have 5 minutes, we'll have to talk. And this is exactly what I work with clients on all the time inside Camera Confident Academy. We work on a system of really first nailing what to say. And so if you don't have your message crystallized, then you're really going to struggle on camera. So before you even hit record, you have to get clear on your message, your value proposition. A simple exercise you can do every day is, what's your elevator pitch? A lot of people are like, elevator pitch, but that is how you introduce yourself to people. So starting with a video that just introduces you to people and getting used to talking about who you are and what you do and what your value is, that's really important. That's the heart of the message, but then there's layers on top of that. We talked about stories. We talked about having a central value proposition that you can communicate. So once you've really nailed what to say, then you can start focusing on how you say it, which is getting on camera. And the short answer is there's no shortcuts. You hit record and you do it again and you do it again and you put in your reps and you keep going. Here's a hack for people who are not really feeling comfortable about releasing those videos. Start a YouTube channel and make all the videos unlisted. Nobody can find them, but you've gone through the exercise of publishing a video. The more you do it, the more comfortable you will be. Obviously, having coaching in the process helps you speed up and not make the same mistakes over and over again. And then I really encourage people to do it messy. So if you stumble, that's okay. People know that you're not perfect. I have students all the time that are like, this is take number 20. And I'm like, no, don't do 20 takes. You can do 2 takes, 3 takes. At a certain point, you start to almost get worse the more you try and redo it over and over again. So instead of trying to get out there and film something in one big long bit, you can also break it up into smaller pieces and edit things together. So there's a lot of things that you can do to really get out there and start posting on social media, but my advice is just start. And you can start with simple videos of you speaking to the camera. And then as you develop the skills, as you learn the process, then you can start to get fancy with B-roll, putting other clips on top, and really go from there. But get off the page once you've got your messaging crystallized, and then you get on camera. And then once you get good at that, then you start pitching yourself and really getting out there on podcasts and media and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. This is actually my favorite question because it's just like getting your reps in. Just if you look at guys like Mr. Beast or just a lot of famous YouTubers or Instagrammers, their first posts were not very good, but they just did what you're doing and just getting the repetitions in. One last question. What are your thoughts on AI in this whole area and Gen AI, and how do you think it'll affect? Is it gonna make it better, or is it you gotta learn how to use it? I'm curious about your thoughts. And how can people find you?
Yes, absolutely. Lots of questions there. Okay, first thing, AI is your friend. AI is a tool that everybody is using. If you've ever wondered how people who you admire can churn out so much content so quickly, the answer is AI and a team. But at the very least, AI and ChatGPT in particular is a fabulous tool for brainstorming, for giving you a frame. I never ever start any video or social media post with a blank page. I always go into ChatGPT first and I get it to give me a frame. However, I never ever copy and paste what it spits out. And here's the danger. I've seen this happen a couple times where people who maybe are in similar niches or even the same niche in some of the group coaching programs that I run and some of the other areas that I work in, I notice that sometimes they get similar things from ChatGPT. So the risk is really that people will start having the same type of message. So that's why, yes, use it as a tool, use it as something that is going to help get that juices flowing, help you through those writer's block situations, but then absolutely make it your own and make sure that you are putting it in your own voice. Because I think a risk, and we're already seeing it as ChatGPT continues to catch on, and it's not just chat, there's lots of really great AI tools, even that I use other than chat, to do all kinds of things on social media. So keep that in mind for sure. As for where people can find me, I really like to hang out these days on YouTube. It's a great format for long form. It's b.camera.confident. Shirley Engel at Camera Confident. I also hang out on LinkedIn all the time. So those are my two big platforms at the moment.
Yeah, I really love this, and I really love it's very clear that you're very well established, and I'm really happy that you're sharing this with the audience. And keep up the great work.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And I would love to hear from anybody who wants to hear more. I also have a podcast called Camera Confident. So we cover this AI, all of these things, what to say it, how to create buzz. So be sure to listen to that either on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And also it's on YouTube because, of course, a video gal needs to have a video podcast, right?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.